In early 2025, something really strange happened in the world of international trade. A high-stakes standoff unfolded, but it wasn't with a rival power or some distant adversary. Nope, the United States found itself challenged by its closest ally and its biggest trading partner, Canada. And that quote right there, it just perfectly sums up the shock that rippled through D.C. For decades, the U.S.-Canada relationship was, well, it was the one thing you could always count on, an unshakable constant. This crisis, though, was about to prove that in our modern world, absolutely nothing is guaranteed.
So how on earth did we get here? Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the initial challenge and how it all started. Then we'll dive into Canada's surprisingly effective playbook. After that, we'll trace the economic blowback as it spread, see how that triggered a major crisis in Washington, and finally, we'll ask the big question, what does this whole mess tell us about power today?
All right, so let's set the scene. It's early 2025. The returning Trump administration has a really clear goal. They want to reassert American dominance in global trade. And where do they start? Right in their own backyard. North America was square in their sights.
Now, the White House strategy was built on one really core assumption, that Canada would be an easy win. The thinking went something like this. Their economy is so deeply tied to ours, so dependent on us, that if we just apply a little pressure, threaten some tariffs, Ottawa would have no choice but to fold. It was supposed to be a quick, decisive victory.
So to kick things off, the administration basically manufactured a crisis where there wasn't one. The USMCA trade deal, a deal that Trump himself had celebrated just a few years earlier, was suddenly being called flawed and unfair. This whole thing was just a setup, a way to create a confrontation to force Canada back to the negotiating table, but this time purely on Washington's terms.
But here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Canada's response was, well, it was anything but predictable. It completely defied Washington's expectations and basically blew up the entire U.S. strategy. I mean, you really couldn't have two more different approaches, right? On one side, you have the U.S. going for loud, public pressure, threats, and just escalating rhetoric. And on the other side, Canada chose this path of quiet restraint, sticking to the letter of the law, and methodically, quietly diversifying its economy. And honestly, this was just a brilliant piece of strategy. By refusing to get into a public shouting match, Canada denied the administration the very oxygen it needs to survive: conflict. It's like the White House was trying to pick a fight, and Ottawa just refused to even step into the ring. Instead, they focused on facts and legal processes.
But don't mistake that silence for inaction, because behind the scenes, Canada was making some huge moves. They weren't just sitting there hoping the storm would pass, they were building a stronger boat. They opened up emergency trade talks with partners in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. They started rerouting key exports, and they just kept insisting on using the dispute rules that were already in the trade deal. The message couldn't have been clearer. Our economy is going to be just fine with or without your cooperation.
And, well, it didn't take long for the consequences of this American miscalculation to start hitting home. The economic ripple effects began spreading across the United States, and they were hitting some key sectors hard.
The pain just kept escalating. Just a few weeks in, you had auto plants in Ohio slowing down because parts were stuck at the border. Then lumber prices shot up, adding thousands of dollars to the cost of a new home in places like Arizona. And by late autumn, farmers in Wisconsin were watching their export contracts get frozen. Suddenly, this wasn't some abstract trade dispute anymore. This was real people feeling real economic pain.
And of course, what happens when things get this uncertain? Wall Street gets nervous. The stock market, which the administration watches like a hawk, started to price in the risk of a long, messy, and unpredictable fight. That uncertainty alone was enough to shake investor confidence, creating a whole other layer of pressure.
So, as these economic costs started to pile up, the standoff quickly spiraled into a full-blown political crisis for the administration. The pressure wasn't just coming from Canada anymore, it was coming from inside the House.
But instead of de-escalating, the president doubled down. He was out there publicly accusing Canada of betrayal, of acting in bad faith, and then he started threatening to invoke emergency powers. This was a move that just stunned people in Washington. I mean, these are powers usually reserved for wartime or a national security threat, not a trade dispute with your closest ally.
This quote here from an inside source, it really gives you a peek behind the curtain, doesn't it? You can just feel the frustration building inside the Oval Office. This quiet, by-the-book resistance from Canada was absolutely infuriating the president, who is now demanding that his staff find a way to weaponize the government against an ally, just for following the rules.
And for a lot of people watching this whole thing started to look like a very familiar pattern. We saw it play out with figures like Jeff Sessions, William Barr, and even his own vice president, Mike Pence. Step 1, an ally follows the law instead of a personal demand. Step 2, that loyalty to the rules is seen as a personal betrayal, and then they're quickly recast as the enemy. Only this time, it was an entire country getting that treatment.
By this point, the political blowback was coming from all sides. You had Republicans in states like Ohio getting an earful from angry business owners. The Chamber of Commerce, not exactly a radical group, took the incredible step of actually suing the administration. Senator Mitt Romney was out there calling the strategy economic suicide, and of course Democrats were hammering the administration for what they called reckless, impulsive governance.
So the White House was completely trapped, and it was a trap of its own making. If they backed down, it would look like weakness, which would be a fatal blow to their whole strongman image. But if they kept fighting, they risked tipping key parts of the economy into a recession. It was a paralyzing dilemma. Okay, so let's pull back for a second, because this whole thing, it was about way more than just North America. It started raising these really fundamental questions about what power even means in the 21st century.
And you better believe the whole world was watching. Allies in Europe and Asia were taking notes, trying to figure out if the US could still be seen as a reliable, predictable partner. And at the same time, America's competitors, they were watching too, looking for any opportunity created by this self-inflicted distraction.
You know, this whole crisis really gave us a masterclass in what modern power actually means. It's not just about having the biggest economy or the strongest military anymore. Real, lasting influence today is built on things like trust, predictability, and a willingness to play by a shared set of rules. When you start to erode those things, your leverage just evaporates, no matter how big you are.
And ultimately, what started as a fight over milk quotas and lumber tariffs became something much bigger. It turned into a debate over the very nature of leadership. It forced everyone to confront a question that really lies at the heart of American foreign policy.
And that question is this: is true power just about the ability to impose your will on others, no matter the cost? Or is it about understanding the limits of your own strength and having the wisdom to work within a system of shared rules? The outcome of this standoff offers some clues, but that question, that's something that is going to define global politics for years to come.